gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? By Great 78.
Who gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? I've seen those English dramas too. They're cruel. So if there's any other way to spell the word, it's fine with me. With me.
Chapter 25. Protection. Friday, November 5th, 1999. Just after lunch. Peckwater, flat 307, Christchurch College, Oxford, England. Draco. Pacing was difficult to accomplish in the little flat without stepping on an empty biscuit sleeve or crust of a sandwich, but Draco did it anyway. Theo was meant to speak with Granger at lunch about the pins, and it was already 1:30. They were due in class at 2:10, and he had a feeling that even if Theo managed to somehow get Granger's pin off of her, it wouldn't be long before she'd miss it and come looking for it. The door of the flat burst open, and Theo hurried in, carrying both his and Granger's coats. "You're lucky it's so warm out today. She didn't notice I had this, I think," Theo said, pulling Granger's raspberry-coloured scarf from beneath the coats. "She said it was attached to this. I don't see it or feel it, but I'm sure she has it enchanted so that I can't." The dark-haired Slytherin held out the scarf to Draco, who snatched it away from him eagerly. Holding it up to inspect, he had to agree with the other wizard. There was nothing to indicate visually that this was anything other than an ordinary scarf. Tapping it with his wand, however, he could detect several complex spells. Notice Me Not, Disillusionment, and Sticking Charms only scratched the surface, he could tell. Theo's wand movements mirrored his own, and the man gave a little whistle. "Sweet Salazar's sack, I knew she was a swot, but this is on a totally different level, Drake. Do you really think you can duplicate something like this?" "No," Draco answered truthfully. To safeguard the scarf, he wound it around his own neck. "I'm taking it to Potter. See if he has any thoughts on how to proceed." "Oh, I want to go," Theo began, a gleam of excitement in his eyes. "It's not an outing, Theo. He asked me to bring him the pin, nothing more," Draco said in dismissal. "A creature." The ancient elf appeared with a pop. "Yes, Master Malfoy, Master Not." Draco cut his eyes sideways to Theo, who was the picture of innocence. "Why does the Black family elf recognize you?" "For shame, Draco! Don't you know this is Franklin's father? Creature and I know each other very well. We bonded over Franklin's tone-deaf insolence." "Again, Theo, Franklin likely cannot hear you. He's not being insolent, he's literally deaf," Draco pointed out. "Regardless, you're not going with me. I doubt the Black Wards would let you in anyway." With that, Draco reached a hand towards Creature. On the elf's other side, Theo did the same. With a pop, the three of them appeared in what had to be the world's dreariest drawing-room, after his own. Where their little sitting-room had been covered in crisp bags and digestives dust, this room was simply dusty with age and disuse. The furniture hulked under faded sheets, and the drapes hung in limp, threadbare panels that Draco was certain were full of doxies. "Creature will fetch Harry Potter." The ancient elf bowed, then popped away again. "Oh, Potter really should have his elf clean this up a bit. This room makes Franklin look positively industrious," said a familiar voice from next to Draco. "Theo, what are you doing here? I told you not to come. And how did you even make it through the wards?" The dark-haired wizard pointed his wand up at an overhead chandelier to dispel a bit of the darkness. The candles all sprang to life, though a fine shower of dust fell from the entire thing with the spell. "Tiberius's grandmother was a Black. Thank goodness for inbreeding, am I right, cousin?" Draco huffed a sigh, then sat on an ancient settee, jumping up quickly when a cloud of noxious dust rose from the cushions. There was another pop, and they were joined by two men in red aura robes. Theo was the first to speak. "As I live and breathe, Ronald! Pleasure to see you again, and so unencumbered by your adoring public." Theo greeted the wizard warmly. "The last time I saw you it was the start of summer, and you had your tongue shoved down some buxom broad's throat, cleaning her tonsils." "Fuck off, Theodore," snarled Weasley, in an aggravated voice. "Godric's ass, the snakes are multiplying." "Just what I was thinking about you," Draco retorted. "Potter, did you have to bring Weasley along?" "Cool it," Potter said briskly. "You brought Theo, and besides, Ron is part of this. He asked his dad about Perkins, and I thought it would be easier for him to tell what he learned than for me to try and relay it. Did you find the pin?" "We did," Draco answered, laying a hand possessively on the scarf before acquiescing and passing it over to the other wizard. He explained briefly about the enchantments preventing detection, and Potter's wand revealed the same. After a moment, Potter shook his head. "I recognize a few of these spells from when we had to hide out on the run from Voldemort. It would take some extensive magic to break them, though." "So what?" Theo asked. "Do we just give this back to Hermione and let Kingsley continue to track her?" "No. We need to make him think Hermione is with Malfoy. We've got to control the timeline of when Kingsley comes back so that we can be there to catch the conversation. If Malfoy's going to goad him into confessing, he won't make the mistake of doing it twice. We're only going to get one shot at this," Potter answered, giving Draco back the scarf before removing his spectacles to clean them on his shirt. "Right." Draco cleared his throat, accepting the scarf from Harry. "I'll hold on to this until we can figure out how to duplicate it, and give Granger the copy." "So, you're going to try and get Kingsley to confess. Let's say he doesn't. What's your backup plan?" Theo asked. "Why don't you mind your own business, not?" Weasley snarled, but Potter placed a hand on his friend's chest. "Ron, mate, simmer down. He's trying to help," said the boy who would not die. To Theo he said, "Right now, it's the only plan we've got. Let's let Ron tell us about what he learned from his dad, about Perkins." The ginger begrudgingly complied. "Dad says Perkins came from a pure-blood family, but his baby sister was born a squib. They were willing to overlook it, but the sister was always sore about it. Their parents sent her to a Muggle boarding school at age 11 in the hopes that she would integrate better with the Muggles, but she resented them for it. She stopped coming home around age 14 or so, he said. He was nearly finished at Hogwarts when she was born, so they were never really close. He said he met with her a few times over the years, sent letters here and there, but she seldom answered." "Was there any indication that she worked with Shacklebolt?" Draco asked. Weasley gave him an exasperated stare. "I couldn't exactly ask my father, who, by the way, also works for the Ministry the same way I do, if he thought his old colleague's estranged squib sister, that he hadn't spoken to in more than a decade, was in league with the Minister for Magic and carrying out some nefarious plot." Draco rolled his eyes, but said nothing. Weasley went on after a moment. "Dad believes the sister got married, but said the last Perkins heard from her, the husband was no longer around. She has a little boy. Perkins thinks his name was something like Josiah, Jonas. Dad says he'd be around my age, but there was no one in our age named Josiah Jonas at Hogwarts, so I have to assume he wasn't magical either." Draco sighed. "So, another dead end." "Afraid so," Weasley said, and for once it sounded as though he meant it. "Well, I think we should do a trial run of this whole thing if we can. Granger will be looking for this scarf soon enough. I'll come up with an excuse to keep it for as long as I can, but she thinks she needs it to get into the magical buildings, and if she doesn't have it by Monday she'll be in a panic," Draco said. The Gryffindors agreed to come at his signal the following morning, knowing that their old friend would likely want to spend the whole of Saturday in the Oxford Library. Creature appeared to return Draco and Theo to Oxford. "Let's stop by Kebab King. I'm famished. I skipped lunch," Theo whinged. Draco, who had also done without a midday meal, readily agreed. They appeared in the Oxford bus station washroom. This time it was Draco arriving with his foot inside the commode, with Theo apparating in, nearly straddled atop his shoulders. "This toilet stall must be cursed," Theo muttered, as the ancient elf gave them an insolent stare from the floor of the stall. Creature stood and hastily popped away. Late in the afternoon. 45 minutes later, the now full former Slytherins joked as they re-entered Flat 307, entirely unawares of the storm that was brewing inside, in the form of an irate and fed-up Hermione Granger. Draco felt sick lying to her about his need for the scarf and his supposed date with Amelia, but he could not allow her to have the scarf back. Now that she had seen it around his neck, chances were slim that she would ever let it out of her sight again. Once Hermione had exhausted herself and had given up, Draco dropped to the sofa, his head in his hands. "She fucking hates me, mate. And I hate this." He gestured around at the unholy filth they found themselves in. "I knew a long time ago that your idea was rubbish, but I thought keeping it up was for the best. That was stupid of me." "You'll get through this, Drake," Theo offered tritely. He checked his watch. "Classes are nearly done for the day, and I'm exhausted. I may just skip dinner and go straight to bed. Give me a shout in the morning when Granger leaves. I want to be around for the trial run." With that, the other wizard retired to his bedroom. Reluctantly, Draco stood, cleaning up the worst offences of the grottiness. She had been angry, to be sure, but the level of anger far exceeded just simple disgust at the filth. True, the state of the flat was currently worse than it had ever been, due to the fact that he'd been searching for her pin for days. But her rage had been palpable this afternoon. What could have set her off, he wondered. He swept together the rubbish from the floor in the sitting room, depositing it in a pile next to the desk. In the kitchenette he closed canisters and jars, collecting the bits and bobs of rubbish as he went. As he gestured his wand to throw away a small pile of filth, the unfamiliarity of one of the pieces caught his attention. Summoning it, he realized it was a letter, written on pale pink paper. His curiosity got the better of him, and he uncrumpled it, flattening it smoothly on the table in the kitchenette. "Hermione, I suppose we should thank you for your letter. It helped the two of us to clarify a few things in our minds. You see, for the last year, we've wondered if we made a mistake in not forgiving you when you came to Australia to restore our memories. After all, you could have left us there, and we would have been none the wiser for it. But you did bring us back. Was it only to assuage your own guilt? Perhaps you even thought you were doing the right thing. You loved us and wanted what was best for us. The problem is this. When you erased yourself from our memory, you erased our family. The memories of the good times and the bad, the heartaches and the joys we shared. You didn't only alter our memories and our photographs. You altered us. Only it was just the parents you knew, not the people we always were. You snipped our daughter cleanly from our minds, but you didn't erase the longing for a family that we had always had before I gave birth to you. Did you know that whilst we were in Australia, we considered adoption? We were in contact with the foster system in Brisbane, and we'd hoped to open our home to a young child that needed it. But the foster system turned us away. Apparently the background that you created for us did not go deeper than passports and driving permits and bank accounts. You did not give us a past, and you did not change our fingerprints, so we were flagged in the Australian system and rejected out of hand with no explanation. So, unbeknownst to you, we had to experience the loss of the idea of a family all over again there. But we had grown to accept it. We just were not meant to be parents, we thought. We were beginning to move on. And then you arrived. When you restored our memories, we were forced to grieve for everything all over again. The loss of our real family, the loss of our possible one, and the loss of the peace that we had finally reached. It has not been easy. Every letter you send to us is like a dagger to our hearts. Every time we think we've moved past everything, that our lives have somewhat settled into a routine. Another letter arrives, and with it, another period of upheaval in our home. A place with a bedroom for a child that doesn't exist anymore. We're not saying that you are no longer our daughter, and that we can never love you again. We're only saying that we need space and time to grieve the lives we once led, and to decide the kinds of lives we hope to have in the future. When you write to us the same way you once did, it tears us to pieces inside. When you tricked us into going away, you took away everything from us. To pretend like everything is the same as it was before feels like you're trying to trick us again, and we cannot take it any longer. Keep us apprised of your new address if you move in future. If and when the time comes that we feel ready to speak, we will get in touch. But for now, we cannot go on this way. Linda and Richard Granger. When had she gotten this? Draco wondered, his own fury building within him. Flipping over the envelope, he saw a date. Yesterday, meaning the letter likely just arrived in the Muggle post. And a location, a street address in Muggle London. Her irrational anger this afternoon suddenly made perfect sense. How could two people have the audacity to call themselves parents when they treated their only child like this? Draco stood, his jaw clenched in anger. Staring once more at the address on the envelope, he bid the words to memory. He'd never been there, of course, but he was certain that he would recognize her magic when he got there. He tucked the letter in his inner pocket next to his handkerchief. Then he spun on the spot, disappearing in a swirl of black robes and berry-colored scarf. The Muggle house stood dark and empty when he arrived, the only light source being a street lamp, through a large window that overlooked a cramped but beautiful little garden. Draco was now standing in a kitchen much larger than the one he'd just left. Far too many Muggle contraptions gleamed white and silver on every surface. The air smelled faintly of toast and sausages, likely prepared that morning for breakfast. Draco checked his watch. It was a bit after 4 on a Friday. He did not know when they would return, but he would be waiting for them. He took his time exploring, not bothering to be discreet. He wanted them to know how easy it had been for him to enter, to trespass into their house, to violate their lives. There were very few photographs, which Draco found odd, considering how many Granger had in her bedroom back at Oxford. The ones here featured only the older couple that he recognized from her windowsill. One showed the couple in front of a small floral shop. Another featured the sandy-haired man on horseback, whilst a third showed the woman standing in front of a circular, columned, open-air structure. Her smile and her copper eyes were an exact replica of Granger's. He moved upstairs, finding a cramped study filled with books. It should have reminded him of her, but none of the text seemed like something that Granger would read. Even here, it seemed, they had made an effort to get rid of her. Draco skimmed his fingers along the cold, lifeless spines, then opened a drawer filled with banking papers. He took them out and looked through them curiously, unsure exactly what he was looking at. From what he could tell, the Grangers were quite well off for Muggles. The last room he entered felt saturated with Granger's presence, despite the fact that it looked scrubbed clean and sterile. There was the scent of gardenias underneath another smell, something like ammonia, and he knew that this was the trace of another effort to erase Granger from their lives. Looking around, he located a switch near the door and flipped it, flooding the room with light. The walls were papered in a soft, buttery yellow, tiny sprigs of pink flowers dotting the surface. The bed frame was painted white, whilst the wardrobe and desk were the soft pink of the flowers on the wall. He smiled at the carefree colours, likely chosen when Granger had been quite young. Opening a small door on the opposite wall, He found a closet filled with boxes, neatly stacked. The outsides of the boxes were labelled in a scratchy capital script, Hermione. Inside were books, not the boring and stuffy books he'd seen in the small study down the corridor, but books that had undoubtedly belonged to a curious and intelligent young mind. There was fiction and non-fiction, fantasy and history, books with pictures, books without. These weren't the books that an adult would be interested in, but the beloved treasures of young woman. He touched the covers of the topmost books gently, glad at least that they had done her this one small act of kindness. Perhaps there was something to salvage, yet. Draco turned off the light and left the room, moving back downstairs to disillusion himself and wait for Granger's parents. He sat on the sofa for almost 2 hours before a beam of light shone on the wall behind him, followed by the sound of Muggle car tires crunching the gravel outside. The pair of them came inside, talking and laughing about their day. The woman turned on the overhead light, then reached for one of the bags in the man's arms. Draco waited until they were a few feet away, directly in front of him, before he ended his disillusionment. The woman's scream was enough to wake the dead. The man's yelled curses were not much calmer. The floor was suddenly covered with items from the bags. Eggs cracked and milk spilled. Bread and vegetables were stomped in an effort to get away from him. With a lazy flick of his wand, Draco closed and sealed the door behind them. Then, for good measure, the one at the back of the house, behind him as well. The Grangers continued to scream both at him and at each other, until Draco could take it no longer. With another minute flick of his wand, silence resettled in the room, their screams muzzled by his silencio. "Doctors Granger, please, forgive my sudden appearance. I'm sure it must have been frightening to you." The pair of them continued to struggle in an effort to scream, and Richard Granger rushed to a drawer near the front door, drawing out a large, heavy metal torch. He held this cocked back over one shoulder, like Thor with his hammer. With almost a feeling of regret, Draco vanished the torch, as well as the golf club that the man tried next. "Please, I need you to know I'm not here to hurt you. I only want to speak with you, and to explain a few things. Can we all just calm down a moment?" It took the better part of 2 minutes, but after a time the Grangers did so. All the while Draco repeated his words in a low voice. Finally, Richard Granger took a deep breath and gave him an angry stare, then pointed at his own mouth. Draco nodded, reversing the spell on the man. "Who are you?" Granger's father spat out. My name is Draco Malfoy. I'm a wizard, and I'm friends with your daughter." At these words, Linda Granger's eyes flew wide, and she hurried to her husband's side, pulling urgently at his arm and pointing fiercely at Draco. "I believe your wife recognizes my name, likely from stories that Hermione told you," Draco said morosely. "Mrs. Granger, Hermione and I might have been on opposite sides for several years, but you should know that I have apologized to her and her friends for the things I did before and during the war. It may be hard to believe, but she and I are friends now, and I would never do anything to hurt her. And that includes hurting you. Can you believe that?" Linda only narrowed her eyes at him distrustfully. Draco nodded his understanding. "You're reluctant to believe me. That's all right. But I'm not here to talk about myself or about my relationship with your daughter. I want to talk to you about this." At these words, he withdrew the letter that he'd found in the flat from his pocket. Linda looked at it with a disbelieving stare, before fixing her eyes upon Draco's. She pointed to her own throat, just as her husband had, and Draco cancelled his silencing charm on her as well. "How did you get that?" "Granger, Hermione, and I are flatmates now at Oxford. She left it in our sitting room earlier today. She doesn't know I'm here right now. She'll likely be quite pissed about it, in fact. She and I have talked about you, about what she did to keep you safe, and about how much she regrets having to do it. But I've told her she shouldn't. She should never regret that." Linda's stare hardened. "She had no right—" "Lindy Hop, what did you write?" Richard interrupted quietly. Draco and Linda turned to him. "Did we get another letter from Hermione? Why didn't you tell me?" Linda dropped her eyes. "I know how much her letters upset you, so I answered it without showing it to you, Richard. I told her about the failed adoption in Brisbane. I'm sorry." Mr. Granger's shoulders sagged. "You didn't have to tell her that. She didn't mean to—" "And yet she did. She did, Richard. She took it all away from us. Our house, our careers, our names, and our second chance at happiness." At these last words, Linda Granger's voice broke with tears. Richard swallowed hard, but said nothing, glancing guiltily at Draco. "Linda thinks it best that we make a clean break. I disagree, but—" He raised his hands in a helpless gesture. Draco turned his silver eyes back to Linda. "You say she took everything away from you, but let me reassure you, she gave you your life. Like I said, we were on opposite sides in the war, and, to be blunt, my side—" At this, he pulled up his sleeve, revealing the skull and snake brand that he kept hidden nearly all of the time. The glamour charms made the brand nearly invisible, only the faintest shadow like an old scar in its place. Draco passed his wand over his forearm, non-verbally cancelling the glamours, and the snake writhed angrily on his skin, looking exactly the same as it had over 3 years ago, when Voldemort had seared it into his skin. There was a sharp intake of breath from Linda, and Draco looked up to meet Richard Granger's wide, fearful eyes. My side was being sent all over the United Kingdom to search out Muggleborns and their families. I witnessed the tortures and murders of people whose only crime was being a Muggleborn, or being related to a Muggleborn, or simply helping a Muggleborn to hide from us. We told Hermione that she should leave that school, didn't we, Richard? We told her that your kind were nothing but barbarians, that she needed to leave." Linda nearly shouted. "It would not have mattered," Draco answered bitterly. "They would have eventually hunted all of you down and killed you. The two of you because you were her parents, and her not only because she was friends with Harry Potter, but also because she was a Muggleborn, and a powerful witch at that." At their looks of surprise, Draco nodded firmly. "Oh, yes, you didn't know. Hermione Granger is a fearsome, extraordinarily capable witch. And she's a war heroine. One of the most well-known witches alive, I'd say. Incredibly gifted. I doubt anyone else in our class could have successfully performed the kind of magic she did on you. Even if most witches or wizards twice her age had attempted it, your brains would have been likely addled beyond use." Both Dr. Grangers looked a bit green at this pronouncement. "Granger put her life on the line for our worlds so many times, your world and mine. She did it because she wanted to keep all of us safe, and she did it because she loved you. She still does. You would not have been safe if you'd stayed here." Richard tried feebly. I was in the service. I learned some hand-to-hand combat." Draco gave a humorless laugh. "You could have had an entire Muggle army with you, and it would not have mattered against even a halfway proficient wizard. You see how easily it was for me to get to you, to silence you, to prevent you from leaving here tonight, and I have no ill intention towards you. But imagine if I had." He took a step towards them, and Linda rushed to her husband's side. Richard pushed his wife behind him as though to protect her. Draco scoffed lightly. "I don't need to imagine it, because like I said, I witnessed that kind of violence over and over again. And I can guarantee you that if Granger had not done what she did, it would have been you, beyond any reasonable doubt." Tears began to fall down Linda's face, and Richard held her against his chest as she cried. Draco drew closer to them before reaching into his cloak for something. Both Doctors Granger flinched, but Draco only withdrew a clean handkerchief, which he passed to Hermione's mother. The woman took it, barely registering it through her fear. When he'd withdrawn the handkerchief, there had been a bit of thick paper under it that came out of the pocket as well. Now he looked down to find Granger's photo, the one that he had duplicated and taken from her room on their first day in Oxford. There, in miniature, on his palm, was Granger's perfect image. Her lovely hair and smile and freckled skin seemed to glow with her magic, but it was her vivacious copper eyes that appeared to hold within them every possibility, every outcome in the universe, all at once. It was easy to believe in magic, he thought, looking into Granger's eyes. Her parents had to know that. His next words were said in nearly a whisper. "I was never forced to kill. But if I had been told to kill, in order to spare my parents, I would have. Granger would have, too. But the main difference between me and her is that she had the courage to fight back, and I didn't. Instead of pushing her away, you should be telling her how proud you are of her. And you should be thanking the heavens that Hermione loved you enough to save you. Being loved by that witch is a gift you shouldn't throw away." Draco reached out his hand, pressing the photograph into Richard's tentative grasp. Then he stepped backwards, his silver gaze unwavering from the familiar copper of Linda Granger's. He took a deep breath and nodded once towards Richard, then turned on the spot and disapparated back into the kitchenette of the tiny Peckwater flat. After a moment, the gravity of what he had just done caught up with him. Granger was going to be positively furious with him, of course, for interfering. But that was no different than how she already felt, he mused, as he took in the remainder of the rubbish that littered the flat. At least now her parents knew the full scope of their daughter's bravery. He looked around the room at his mess. He could not go on this way. For her sake, and for his own. He had to fix this. Multiple cleaning spells and washing charms were necessary. He magically scourgified and folded his clothes neatly, putting them away in his trunk and in the coat closet. He vanished the duplicates of smelly socks. He swept the remainder of the crisp bags, beer cans, and other filth into a pile in the center of the sitting room, then raised his wand to vanish the lot. As he did so, Draco noticed something familiar sticking out from the edge of the pile, its pristine inky blackness a stark contrast to the mess. Reaching down, he withdrew the condor feather quill, the very same one that he'd gifted to Granger a bit over a year ago. In her anger at him, she must have dropped it in the sitting room. She would want this back, of course. Walking to his desk, he jotted a quick note with the quill, not even bothering to use his best penmanship. His body felt near depletion, and exhaustion was overtaking him after such a taxing week. It was 7:30 on Friday evening, and all he wanted to do was to sleep. "Granger, when you were angry earlier, you must have dropped your quill, but I found it and saved it for you. Something as rare and beautiful as this doesn't deserve to be lost forever. The same goes for you. I cleaned everything up. I'm sorry I acted the way I did towards you, and I'm sorry for making you live this way for so long. I hope you like it better like this. I hope you'll like me better like this. Perhaps one day you'll even love me like this, the way I love you. Draco." Placing the note carefully on the kitchenette table with the quick quotes quill, Draco skipped removing his clothes. Granger might search for and take back the scarf if he did. He tucked the charmed bit of cloth deep into his inner pocket and found his blanketed pillow from his trunk. Settling into his usual place by the door of Granger's room, he looked back over at the quill and note. No! He could not tell her he loved her in a note on the kitchen table. He could not be such a coward. "Axio note," he whispered, and the note worked free from under the quill, zooming across the room to him. He stuffed the note deep into his pocket, nestling it between the folds of Granger's scarf. Draco would tell her one day. But first he would need to prove it by saving her. He checked his watch. Barely 8 o'clock, but he was exhausted. Like Theo, he decided to skip dinner and just go to bed. A revelio indicated that Granger had done the same. He settled his pillow against the door jamb. His ear leaned against her bedroom door to hear the first possible signs of danger from within. In a matter of seconds, he was asleep. Thank you for listening to Who Gives a Fuck About an Oxford Comma by Great 78. If you enjoyed the story and would like to listen to more, please follow me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Silver and Copper. Or you can find me under Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.